The U.S. Supreme Court concludes its oral arguments on Obamacare, and the president speaks out against the court. Hi, I'm Matt Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel. Joining me is Deryl Edwards, who is the president of Liberty Counsel Action. Deryl, the arguments have concluded in the Obamacare case, 3 days of oral arguments before the United States Supreme Court, based upon particularly the Tuesday argument on the individual mandate. A lot of people are predicting that the Supreme Court will ultimately, by a very narrow decision, strike down the individual mandate as unconstitutional. Of course, we never know that. But in response to that prediction, President Obama has spoken out against the United States Supreme Court.
Well, it looks like he's trying to pave the way for a possible reversal in the court, but being very intimidating about it as he's going out there and threatening the court in such a way to say that you're going to stand against America and you're going to be against, I think it was Chuck Schumer that said you're going to be against the mainstream of America, which seems to be not the case when the overwhelming majority are against Obamacare.
Well, you remember in the State of the Union address, President Obama spoke out against the United States Supreme Court and chastised the justices right there with respect to its ruling on the Citizens United case dealing with political campaigns. From that moment on, Justice Alito and some other justices decided not to go back to the State of the Union because it's inappropriate for the President of the United States to do that on national television. But at any rate, he's done it again, and so has Chuck Schumer. And they're setting this up in the event that the Supreme Court strikes down Obamacare as a political issue. They're setting it up to make an argument that the Supreme Court is an activist court. The ironic thing that I took away from the president's message is that he said it would be unprecedented for the Supreme Court to strike down a law that was passed by Congress. Really? Well, it's really unprecedented for the president and the Attorney General, Eric Holder, to not defend a law, i.e. the Defense of Marriage Act, that was not barely passed by Congress, as in the case of the Obamacare that split down party lines, but was overwhelmingly passed by both Democrats and Republicans and signed into law by a Democratic president. It was overwhelmingly passed in 1996. And yet he wants that struck down. And over here, a law that barely passed along political partisan lines, he said it'd be unprecedented to strike it down. It just seems to be a contradiction.
It also seems to be even more so that he doesn't really care for the judicial branch, that he doesn't want to checks and balances against Congress or against himself as long as they're in the majority, as long as his party and his ideology is in the majority. If he was to fall back out of the majority again and could not pass something, then he'd want the Supreme Court there to stand against the conservatives.
Yeah, it's very political. I think it's certainly inappropriate for a president to be able to do that to a Supreme Court and try to intimidate them and tell them which way they should rule. We've never really seen that, I don't believe, in past presidents. And certainly we don't know which way the Supreme Court is going. You never can tell ultimately and be 100% sure by virtue of the oral argument. But I can tell you that at least on Monday when they did the argument on the Anti-Injunction Act, I think you're going to get a unanimous decision, 9-0, that the Anti-Injunction Act does not apply. They may ultimately decide that for different reasons, but at the end of the day, they're going to decide that it doesn't apply to this case. They're going to get right to the merits. When you move over to the individual mandate, if you're going based upon the argument that was presented on Tuesday, it looks like there's going to be a 5-4 decision to strike down the individual mandate. Justice Kennedy was very much questioning that and very concerned about the individual mandate. When you come over to the final day of argument with regards to whether or not the mandate being struck down, that's the only thing, or will other parts of the law be struck down, I think what you're going to see is probably a majority of the justices saying that if the mandate goes, the other two legs of Obamacare goes, that is, the requirement that you cover pre-existing conditions or what is known as guaranteed issue, and the requirement that insurance companies can no longer really spread their risk through what's called a community rating system. Those are the three legs of the Obamacare stool. How far beyond that they go, how far beyond that they strike it down, I think the best approach is Scalia. And Scalia said, how can we choose what parts are good and what parts are bad? Strike the whole thing down because it's all intertwined. Parts of these things would never have been passed. They were quid pro quos. I'll put this piece of pork in if you vote for the Obamacare. And consequently, I think they ought to strike it down and start all over again. But we won't know exactly how much they'll do until they actually make their ruling.
What is humorous, actually, to read some of the liberal commentators, and you can see they're bringing out the forces now. It's not just President Obama, but they've got this whole orchestrated movement because they're preparing that the Supreme Court is going to do this. And actually, I think they hope behind the scenes they're going to influence people. And I know you talked before about how Justice Kennedy had changed the vote back in the early 90s. But I think in this case, what someone had read, I wrote yesterday, had said that it would throw the healthcare system into chaos, which I thought, well, how strange. People are saying this is actually Obamacare is thrown into chaos.
Obamacare caused the chaos.
And we'd be happy to go back to the way it was before.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. I mean, it's nonsense to say it would throw it in chaos to strike this down. It has been thrown into chaos by virtue of Obamacare. And the more that it goes into effect, particularly if we get to 2014 and the whole thing goes into effect, it'll be complete chaos. It'll be a complete economic meltdown, in my view. But what we have here is, again, like you mentioned, we don't know. I think he may be, and others may be, trying to influence the justices during the phase of the writing. We do know back in 1992, after the Planned Parenthood versus Casey decision was argued, at the end of the week, they got in conference, like they usually do, and they vote, beginning with the Chief Justice going down to the most junior justice. Each person gives their vote and the reasons why. They don't say something after they've already spoken. They say it once. It gets down to the end. They have to say whatever they want in that first time. The vote's taken. At that point in time, the writing begins. The most senior justice in the majority assigns the writing. In 1992, it was a 5-4 decision to overrule a previous precedent, Roe versus Wade, the abortion decision. Kennedy was part of that 5. 30 days into it, he succumbed to the lobbying of O'Connor and Souter and switched his vote at the end of May. For the next 30 days, it was 5-4 the other way, and so the decision was taken from Rehnquist and given over to other justices to write the decision that came out at the end of June. So we do know that there's precedent for justices changing their vote and thus changing the majority and literally flip-flopping during the middle of this writing phase. So we're asking people around the country to pray as this writing phase continues.
Yeah, so I think most people are probably not aware that they heard that there was a vote going to happen. It was just a couple of days after the arguments had finished. And probably most people thought, well, this is a binding vote, and after that, they'll be writing their opinions, and it'll all be kept secret as it does, and it never leaks. But the idea that actually someone could change their vote, I had not really heard of that, and I think people don't understand exactly how the Supreme Court works.
And sometimes they can be drastic, like they were in 1992, a complete change of the majority. Other times it could be minor, as they're writing the opinion and someone sees a draft of that opinion and they decide to maybe go to the person who's writing the majority opinion. It could be some things are tweaked, some things are changed, but it could be drastic, where if you completely change sides, it can completely change the outcome of the vote. This case is going to be very close. And therefore, notwithstanding what happened during the oral argument week, we're asking people to pray that this decision strikes down Obamacare. It is an evil law, in my view. It is a terrible law. It is anti-life and anti-liberty. It needs to go in its entirety and start all over again. And
we haven't even discussed the abortion aspect, which is something we need to remind people that, we were told that was not going to be part of it. They had this little law that was attached to the end to buy a couple more votes, and it turned out that it was very much embedded within that completely.
And that's why I say it's an evil law, because it is the largest funding of abortion in history, and it really has blood on it in the sense that it is forcing people around the country to fund the killing of unborn children's lives. And that's why I think it's an evil law. It needs to go in its entirety. Continue to pray for this case. Go to Liberty Counsel's website or call us on the phone at toll-free, 800-671-1776. Either way, ask for the bumper sticker, Lord, deliver us from Obamacare. We want you to display it, but we also want you to pray that prayer and pray that this decision is completely striking down the Obamacare decision. We're living at very interesting times, particularly in 2012 with this case and also the other issues that we're facing here in America. Go to Liberty Counsel's website and sign up for the Liberty Alert and the Liberator newsletter. You can also sign up for our Grassroots Action email, all right there on the website. You can give an online credit card contribution to Liberty Counsel as well. And you can also order the book, The Patriot's Handbook on Religious Liberty, which has the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the essay from Patrick Henry, Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death, and much more. Ask for the Patriot's Handbook on Religious Liberty. Go to Liberty Counsel's website, lc.org.